say anything. Say anything.
So yeah, second start format.
It's like having a conversation with you now.
Yeah.
Wait till they,
Normally
Yeah,
it's a circle, so
wait till they hear what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something completely separate. So
There will be a side conversation.
You talk about
that's
yourself.
we're going to talk about boats.
Yes.
And yeah.
So there's no real formal questions. We're discussing the mental aspects of life on boats. So don't feel like there's any. It's your turn, and now it's your turn, and now it's your turn. It's a free for all.
Right.
If you want to swear, you can, but it's going out live.
That's his problem, not mine.
Or are you a perpetual?
I only swear at patients.
Oh dear Lord. Okay. Might need to get a new one of these.
I just always wanted to have one.
What's it?
And we're back between two Yetis. We are live-ish from the OASIS Lounge on day 4 of the boat show.
Oh, yes.
It does seem like the Day of the Dead today, doesn't it?
Indeed.
The parties were last night.
Not for me.
Were you a good girl?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yes,
we went out for dinner.
Were you a good girl?
Yeah.
I'm abstaining from answering that. Okay. It's best.
Only on a Saturday night.
We're in the OASIS Lounge here at the Swimming Hall of Fame and during the boat show. And this is it's Captain's Hideout Part 2. Is he allowed to say that?
Yeah, it's a captain and crew oasis.
Away. It's an oasis away
Right,
from
chill
the
out
chaos
place.
that's going on
Yeah.
out there. And we've been invited to do a 3-part discussion around crew health, both physical and mental. On day part 1, we covered the insurance aspects of what can actually go wrong. Silly things like motorbike accidents and eating street food. And I gave the insurance people a good tip on how to get people signed up.
Yeah.
Target the parents. Part 2 was yesterday, and we discussed the physical challenges on board boats. And it seemed like everyone's got back problems, breaking backs, back strains, it just
Sciatica, things like that.
sciatica and stuff like that. It seems it's a very, very physical job. Now, my part is I've never worked on a boat. I've only ever seen it from afar, so I'm kind of learning as I go here. And so today, in part 3, we want to discuss the mental health or the mental challenges.
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above. So mental health is part of the overall,
Well-being.
physical well-being of any individual. I think everyone's pretty well versed that stress, sets you up for, physical
things.
illness. Physical illness. It manifests itself in, headaches and back problems, stress, tense muscles. It also causes gut problems. So keeping someone as mentally healthy and balanced and stable as you can is just as important as taking care of the physical body. And this.
So this is Becky. Let's introduce people, my fellow panelists. So Becky, this is your 30-second elevator pitch.
Rebecca Castellano. I work for Medical Support Offshore, a UK-based company. We provide medical kits, medical support by telephone to our wonderful medical director over here and the owner of the company.
And my fellow Brit. This is good. We've got
Fellow
British,
Brit,
we've got
yeah,
American.
Absolutely,
exactly,
absolutely. Both sides of the pond represented here. And we also do training, and that's where John comes in. So I'll let John introduce.
My name is John Heiser. I am a training instructor here in the Southeast of the United States and pretty much wherever they send me. Also work for MSOS. We do medical and rescue instruction. So we don't just talk about the aspects of medicine, this is what you might see. We talk about real life scenarios when something is going to happen. How is your crew going to react to it? What's your response to it mentally? How you're going to respond to it mentally, and then what to do afterwards, which is really what we're going to talk about a lot today. When something does happen, how's your crew going to respond to that for the next month, next 6 months, next year, even on to their next job? So we'll talk about that. But back to, I'm John Heiser. I do work for MSOS as an instructor, teaching both medical and rescue aspects of it, and absolutely love working with this aspect of the job.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
The pleasure is all mine.
And he's got a really big contract. And Spike, you are...
So I'm the managing director of the company and medical
Which in
doctor.
America is CEO.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
we don't
so
know what
CEO,
managing
managing
director
director.
is.
Right.
It's the same thing. So
It's like
basically,
you're
so
sorry.
yeah. So I started the company and so I try to organise everything in all parts of the world where we operate. So our headquarters is in Southampton, in the UK, and we have an office in Palma in Mallorca. So in the middle of the Mediterranean, which is a big hub for super yachts, and then and then obviously we have an office here as well, run by Becky, which is another big super yacht hub. So we've got feet on the ground in the three main kind of areas where super yachts go. So
Why did you start MOS?
so I started doing this around about 20 years ago. I did a round the world yacht race just over 20 years ago, going around the world the wrong way. So
The wrong way?
Yeah, going upwind all the way through the Southern Ocean, and which is it's quite hard work. And then I worked for the challenge business for about 10 years after that, organising all their medical support for all kinds of for this amateur yacht race, and that taught me a huge amount about supporting people in the middle of very remote locations in the world's oceans. The company eventually went bust, and then I was being asked to do things, by lots of captains that I'd come into contact with, and so I thought, well, myself and my wife thought we better start a company. So that's where, and it seemed to be, and so what we did was we thought, what do we do? Well, we're going to be doing medical support offshore, so we called it Medical Support Offshore Limited.
You see, this is the great thing with British companies. Ron Seal.
Yes.
It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, precisely, exactly. Yeah. Yes. So that was exactly right. And it was just like, and it was kind of like a play on. So the initials are MSOS. So it's kind of SOS.
Medical
save
help.
ourselves
Yeah,
type thing. So,
medical SOS.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Very good.
Yeah.
All right, so you're a medical. You are a doctor though, right?
I'm still a full-time intensive care consultant in the UK.
Oh, so you work in a hospital as well as
do.
doing the.
I do. Yes. Yeah. So I do both. I run the company, and I also, doing the clinical side of things, I very, very much enjoy, and it also keeps me in contact or keeps me in touch with the latest developments on the medical side of things.
Right.
And a lot of what we do in intensive care, we can move that kind of technology offshore, particularly with the development of what we call POCT or point of care testing. We can move that technology offshore. So that's a massive kind of change over the past 20 years. Is with the bedside kind of testing things that we can do, and that coupled with the improvement in global communications is absolutely fantastic. The two technologies really marry up very, very well to be able to provide pretty comprehensive medical support offshore.
So one of the things that came up yesterday was there's the physical aspect of it, but the mental side of it, the screening process is non-existent to a degree. People like Blue Water do. It's good. They serve a good purpose in as much as if you get crew from them, they've done some of that for you.
Right.
But what kind of problems are there?
Soup to nuts, really. But talking about the mental aspects, really, what started to drive this conversation is that there have been, unfortunately, a number of suicides on board by young crew.
So statistics, how many are there a year?
In the yachting industry?
Yeah.
I don't have an exact number. I just know that there have been at least 4 in the last 6 to 7 months.
I've
Which
heard that it's at least one a week.
that's quite possible. I'm not in touch with worldwide. I'm kind of
worldwide. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Because nobody gathers the statistics from across the whole world. Nobody has those numbers. So we have a perception of what may be going on, but I think there's a lot. We see part of the picture, but we certainly don't see the whole picture. There's a lot more going on offshore than we ever come into contact with.
Right. Okay.
If you get those numbers, it would be a little difficult because you're not just talking about on the vessel, talking about when someone comes off a vessel. Does that count as someone that has spent 6 months on a vessel traveling that has gotten to this mental state where they look at that? So
Right.
the
Exactly.
number would really vary in what we're looking at. Is it?
Yeah.
So 50 a year actually could be very conservative.
I think
Could be very conservative.
Very
with the amount of
conservative,
crews that are out there.
There's a WHO figure for number of deaths at sea annually.
Right.
So you'd be surprised, there's about 30,000 people die every year.
Is this from
at
falling
sea.
overboard or?
All kinds of things.
From
So
everything.
lots of kind of indigenous fishermen and I mean that's probably an underestimate of
Yeah.
number of people.
I think out in Thailand
So-
and places like that.
Precisely.
Not reported. Yeah.
Yeah.
So death count's pretty damn high
It is.
for a very small.
It is, yeah. And in terms of mental health problems, I mean, as John says, if they're the ones that commit suicide at sea, probably fairly, not many in the wider scheme of things, but then probably quite a lot committed suicide on land. And we see, I know from my own practice, in hospital, we see lots of suicides or suicide attempts. The problem is if they're out at sea, you're by definition you haven't got a hospital there, and so trying to cope with the consequences of a determined suicide effort is very, very difficult.
Now we've jumped straight to suicide. So
Right,
we've gone
but
to end game.
that's the end game, and that's obviously, the last thing in the world anybody wants to see happen. But I think what leads to that is, it's a stressful job. It's a stressful job for someone who's mentally healthy.
You see, I preempted this. I have never worked on a boat.
Right.
It seems like a very cushy job.
It does sound, and it sounds very glamorous, and it's attractive, to young people, to go on a grand adventure and, to work on a yacht and travel around the world and make lots of money and they're either right out of, high school or just graduated college or it's a gap year or they're not quite sure really what they want to do with their lives. And so this looks like, they consider themselves very fortunate to secure a job. They would get crew training and get whatever licensing they need. The problem is, and we've had this discussion with a lot of folks, mental illnesses occur in every race, every age, every ethnic group. No one is immune. No one is immune.
Is that because we all look the same on the inside?
Exactly right.
Good
We're
Lord.
all exactly the same on the inside. And how someone's wired emotionally, mentally, there can be a hereditary factor involved, or they could have, I think everyone here, if you were to talk to anyone, they all know someone who suffers from depression, anxiety, alcoholism. There's a raft. Everyone has someone in their family, or they've personally experienced bouts of depression throughout their life. Usually mental illnesses will manifest themselves between the ages of 13 and 24, which is the perfect time that young people show up looking for jobs on yachts.
Yeah.
They may be undiagnosed, they may have symptoms that nobody pays attention to or recognize that, that is part of a mental illness. Then you get a job on a boat and you're faced with this extremely difficult job that it just exacerbates, underlying mental health issues.
And as somebody said yesterday, there's no escape.
there's no way to get off the boat.
Yeah.
You know,
If you
there's
hate your fellow crew, you're sleeping with them in the same cabin. There's no
that's
time
exactly
away.
right. That's exactly right.
And that's a really good point, because, as Becky was saying, when you come into this, you're buying into this, what you mentioned was this glamorous field of, I'm going to travel, I'm going to be able to save money, I'm going to be able to get this. And when you get there, you're in a confined quarters with people that you really don't know at all.
Right.
And you're young, so you have to adjust to personalities, all different personalities. I always joke and say, I grew up in the same room with my brother, but I don't want to be around him 24 hours a day because we would drive each other nuts. Well, now you're in a room full of 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 other people that you have to adjust to it, and there is no escaping that.
Right. And some of them are slobs, and some of them are neat freaks, and some of them are controlling. They come from different countries, different cultures. You don't have the same food likes or dislikes. You don't have anything in common with them, and yet you're living literally right underneath it, in each other's back
Farting,
pockets.
belching, snoring.
Exactly.
Oh.
And
Instantly. You're not even warming up into it. It's like, hey, you're getting thrown right into it.
Right. Now, add on top of that, 14-hour work days. If you work on a yacht that does charter, they're doing back-to-back-to-back charters. There's no downtime. They're working 14 hours a day. You're grabbing sleep. You're grabbing food, whenever you can. The stress, maintaining this really high level of care to the owners or your charter guests. You're always on. You have to be neat and look right, and you have to be physically fit and always have a smile on your face. When you are forced to do that, it's a perfect storm, the whole environment. And if you have some underlying, issue, this is just going to manifest. So I've never been surprised when someone's told me that, a 23, 24-year-old took their own life, in the yachting industry. And it's everyone else is shocked. And I'm like, unfortunately.
Well, who is that to reach to? Because is it the captain's responsibility for his crew?
Well, ultimately, yes. Unfortunately, the captain's job is to maintain the health and well-being of his crew and his vessel. So ultimately, yes, he is responsible for looking out. Problem is that mental health is you can't see them.
I tell you what's the trouble is with mental health. It's terrifying. If you go into a supermarket or somewhere and you see somebody who's acting differently, you have no idea how to manage it, and you just want to avoid it. And I can't imagine captains have taken sensitivity training or anything like that. They're there to do the physical aspects of the boat.
Right. But there will be, there are subtle things that you're in your busy day on the boat, with all the other things that you have to deal with. There may be subtle issues that your crew members are displaying. There may be outbursts of anger. They may suffer from anxiety, which will manifest itself. Dr. Spike can certainly describe an anxiety attack has physical manifestations, and so they're calling him.
You've got there's a whole spectrum of presentations. As we said, culminating in suicide. But normally there's a lot of other things, happening before that. Now, an insightful captain, the captains who take the team side of things seriously, they'll have done leadership courses, they've done management courses and part of those courses is about spotting stresses, like for you, John, in your cruise at your emergency cruise. Seeing the guys who are exhibiting, things like, as Becky was saying, either bursts of anger or
I think we might have a slight microphone issue.
Oh, well, I've got a slight microphone issue.
It's
Right.
My microphone.
John's.
I will speak louder.
You speak louder.
I can do that.
So you get the people who become overtly very anxious, but you get other people who do exactly the opposite and become very, very withdrawn, and it's debatable which is more serious, because both can culminate in
Well, they said that with Titanic, didn't they? The ones that are shouting, leave them. It's the ones that are quiet that you
Well,
need to
exactly.
attend to?
So that's what we're doing, and you see this.
Why do I think
you see-
Titanic?
So John sees this. So I work inside hospital. John sees the tough end right outside, and it's the people who are it's the quiet ones you want to go and see to start with, rather than one's making a lot of noise. Or
It's definitely
Right.
mental health is the hot topic right now. So you're seeing. Is that Anna?
You're fine. It's
Okay.
yours.
Okay, hold on. Let me close the curtain because then we'll get a bit more. Sorry, we just got to be. Okay. Now we're in a cocoon.
So since it's a hot topic right now, what you're seeing is all different angles, and people come in with ideas and suggestions, and looking at all different angles, from military coming back to post-traumatic stress syndrome in different realms. Actually, what we're figuring out is people with technology are losing the ability to actually communicate with each other and actually just talk. So one of the subjects that we brought up the other day was, when is the last time that you actually just sat down and talked and listened to someone? Now, when you're with these crews, it's tough because, as we said, you're working 14 hours a day. But when's the last time that you just asked someone, hey, how's it going? Is everything all right? I mean, I've had people that have just blown up on me, and I've had to maintain quiet, and then given it 5 minutes, and then turned around and said, is everything okay?
Yeah, what's
Anything
going on?
And the response is usually amazing. They're amazed that I would maintain that calmness and want to know if everything's okay with them. And they open up. You'd be surprised how much people really want to open up when they're being listened to. But unfortunately, I think most of the time with technology, with social media, people are just waiting for their turn to talk. So if we can slow down a little bit, and I know it's cliche to say, but if we can just listen a little bit more, and when we see those problems that Dr. Briggs was talking about, of outburst, all of a sudden becoming quiet, saying, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything you want to talk about?
It's like in medicine, so we have a mentoring system, so that somebody who may be struggling, and these young people ending up on these boats in fairly isolated parts in the world, as you said, in a very kind of enclosed environment, they haven't developed coping strategies to be able to deal with all the stresses and strains that may be put on them.
Right.
So
They're away
actually
from home for the first time.
Precisely, and if they've got, and so the captains as well, or the older crew on board who've got families and children back at home, that's another another stress, and they're removed from them for at least half the year, sometimes longer. So
See,
actually
that's
having a
another
mentoring
thing.
system.
I always find that amazing. These people who have families and then they're married and they're away.
Right.
But that's gone on all the, if you look at the army,
Right.
that's exactly the same thing. If
But
you
there are crew-
look at the merchant navy,
There are crew that have, boyfriends, girlfriends, significant others, and they work on different boats.
Is there PTSD from working on a super yacht? Because you certainly have it from an
not
army.
per se, but if you.
But it could be.
Depending on what they see. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and we've had instances of that.
An adjustment period, I think, would be a better term, because once you come off the vessel, you have to readjust to
Right.
a bigger world
Right.
of not just your specifics.
And then to add, if I can add to that, there's also the anxiety that if you're perceived by your captain or your fellow crew members, as weak, or the weak link, as part of the team, because you're having trouble coping with something, you're not a happy person, and you manifest that in how you treat others as well. They don't want to be around you if you're always Debbie Downer, or if you're crying, or if you are angry all the time, and you can become even more and more isolated. So it's and you don't want to say anything to anybody because you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to be looked upon as like I said, that broken link.
Well, now you're coming into bullying.
And you can be bullied. I mean,
Bullying and sexual harassment.
Exactly.
That's yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, you're living in close quarters, young men, young women. There are attractions.
Alcohol.
And then on top of all of that.
But you don't have co-ed bunks, though, do you?
No.
It's definitely separate. What do we do?
But their cabins are literally right next to
Right
one
next
another.
to-
They're
yeah.
sharing bathrooms. You know, these things happen. You know, there's hookups and breakups, and if you break
Jealousies
and you name it. I mean, it literally is like Peyton Place. It is a constant drama. You see captains, they'll ask them, what are the biggest challenges, or what are the things that you dislike most, and they all are talking about the drama. So this is a reality of their everyday life, and not everybody is wired to deal with that.
Yeah.
And sometimes just having the captain taking a crew member off the boat, take them for a burger, sit down, quiet time. What's going on with you?
Well, that's exactly like as I was saying, that's exactly a mentoring process. So to be able to cope with these things, letting the crew know that they have got someone they can go and talk to, that they,
On the boat or off the boat?
On the boat or off the boat.
Because mentoring's come up a couple of times in discussions.
Right.
Yeah.
How important they are, good and bad. And you don't have anything like the Samaritans, do you? If you're on a
Offshore?
boat. Yeah.
No, but we get, so we run a telemedical support service, and we get calls from crew, offshore.
Just wanted to talk.
Yeah, just wanted to talk, and we also get. I had a call about 9 months ago where the captain called, and the stewardess, one of the stewardesses on board, was actively trying to commit suicide.
How was she trying to commit suicide?
Well, with either the knives out of the galley or trying to jump over the side. So and they were 3 or 4 days. They were in a very deserted part of the Pacific, so we had to cope with that situation until we could get.
And what, you drugged her up, or?
So we used a variety of therapies to control the situation. We don't often say drugged up.
Used a variety of therapies to control the situation.
Yes, which we did.
Write that one down.
So that was that worked out okay. And we got the stewardess off the boat. And into safe hands, and she still has problems, and that's another problem as well, because mental health, if you're on land, you've got continuity of care, and you're always going to the same therapist or the same psychiatrist or same psychologist, and so you see the same person all the time. But these the boats are very peripatetic. They move around a lot. So trying to establish peripatetic.
What does that mean?
It means they move around a lot.
Oh, okay.
So in different locations, and it means trying to actually with this particular girl, trying to actually have a continuity of care for her. For her mental state, because actually what she doesn't need is seeing lots and lots and lots of different medical professionals. She needs to have, see the same person and develop a relationship, a medical kind of relationship with that person, and then that gives what should be able to give a good outcome.
Would having a therapist on board help?
Expensive.
Very.
What if it was over Skype? So it was like an hour session once a week.
If someone had
that work?
they could certainly, if they have a psychologist and some part of talk therapy.
Because it is that the continuation. You do need to see the same person to trust and build. And
Another issue.
But they're still in that very kind of enclosed environment, and that may be causing a problem. And so actually removing them from that environment. Maybe a major part of the solution to the problems.
And another problem too is that there are certain mental illnesses that are lifelong, and they're well treated with medication, and you would never know. Bipolar disorder is a typical example.
And a dangerous one.
It can be, but it's often well controlled with medications. Sometimes those medicines may need to be adjusted up or down. The problem is that when someone feels mentally stable and comfortable with their medication, often they may get to a point where they don't feel that they need it anymore. So they'll stop taking it. And then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to anyone around them, that they even had an issue, or that they were even taking medication. And then all of a sudden, they become either extremely manic or extremely depressed, or wide swings in between. Nobody knows what's going on with them. Another issue is that they may run out of their prescription because they've been away from home or away from that continuity of care,
Is it
and they
do have
can't
to
get their
disclose it?
medication. No, they're not required to disclose.
think
So if they
For,
do run out, they could genuinely just
So to work
run
offshore,
out.
Yes.
to work offshore, you have to have a medical quality. You've got to have a medical assessment, and as part of that assessment, you are supposed to divulge everything and all the medications that you're taking to be able to get what's called an ENG1 certification for, and there are other parallel certificates around the world, but you're supposed to make a full disclosure. But I know that that sometimes people don't, because they know if they disclose something, they're not going to be able to get a
Get
job.
the job, yeah.
Right.
So, but it's a very difficult thing. And Becky makes a very good point at going back to the continuity of care, being able to get those medicines, and be off and be down in,
Fiji.
down to Antarctica for 6 months. You have to take a 6-month supply of medicines, and it's not that easy to get hold of.
It's not easy to get 6 months worth, is
No,
it?
no.
No.
In the UK, you can't go to your GP and say, "Can I have 6 months of medicines?"
Yeah.
That's not a routine thing. There are ways around it, but it's not easy.
Right.
It actually could be a red flag. I think
Yeah.
when we come in, we talk about the mental aspect of the job. Another big issue we have is we talk about doing medical stuff on board. So when we come on board, I can teach you how to work with a laceration, to do sutures, to work with a broken arm. Those are direct things that I can see and I can work with. When you talk about the mental challenges, it's so much of a bigger picture that there's just not one cure for everything. So when we talk about bringing a therapist in, you could have the person that wants to open up to the therapist, or the person that's going to stay quiet and just tell the therapist what they want to hear. Meanwhile, they're suffering inside. Everyone's going to open up a little differently, present just a little differently. And I really believe that comes to the people around them to take that moment and try to figure out, okay, where are we at with this person? How can we talk to them? How can we get them to open up and figure out what's going on?
It's the mutual support within the team.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the working the team aspect. And that's one of the things that when we're on board, we've been in training a lot more on is, hey, the kits that we're providing for you are there if you need them. You have the aspect to have personalized care. You call Doc, and he can help you figure things out. So we always say, is it up to the captain? It's up to the captain to see that something's going on, or the crew to say, hey, Cap, I think something's going on, and keep the gossip down, because that's another large aspect of it.
Yeah.
But
Right.
overall, to get a professional consult and sit here and say, listen, I might have something going on that's above my knowledge. What do you think of what I'm seeing here? Do you agree with me or not? Just to have a quick phone call to make would help out a crew tremendously, especially working as a team.
And of course, the captain, may have problems themselves, and then so who do they get to who do they get to talk to? It's very difficult for a captain to talk to somebody else in the team. It's not that easy.
And then in
And what
this
is it?
industry also, let's add to all of this alcohol.
Right.
And you finish a 14-day back-to-back charter, the crew finally gets cut loose to go have some fun, and then first thing they do is they all head for the pub, and you add alcohol into the mix, into the fray. That would be one of the things to pay close attention to, is how much alcohol use. If it's just one night and everybody goes out and gets pissed, and it's once in a blue moon, but you may have a crew member who's consistently drinking. It's like every time you turn around, they're always, and not just recreational drinking, they're drinking till they're falling down drunk. Sometimes we've had the owner's alcohol disappears. They're drinking on the job. And often that's their attempt to control symptoms. They may be trying to deal with depression, which alcohol only makes that worse, or they may be trying to control manic or hyper type symptoms where they're feeling anxious all the time, and they're using alcohol as a downer, as a means for controlling their symptoms.
Well, we had a discussion about sexual harassment a few weeks ago, and one of the things that came up was there's no line of I'm working and I'm not working. and in this industry, because you're at a boat show. It starts at 10. You get here 9. If you haven't gone out the night before, you start drinking. The parties start at 3-4 in the afternoon.
Right.
Are you working at 3-4 in the afternoon? Of course you are. But you're socializing, and then
Right.
it carries on to what? 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning,
Right.
and then you're back.
Right.
At what point were you not working? At what point were you socializing? And you were socializing with the same people you were just working with.
Right.
And I can see it being even worse on a boat, because I'm sure they're just going out and getting drunk with the same crew.
With the same people, that they live with.
Is there no off time?
Yeah, some crew members actually do work very hard when they do get their downtime. They're extreme adventurers. They travel a great deal. They'll go mountain climbing and biking.
But
and
is it like 7 days on, 7 days off, or is it?
Every boat's
No.
different, so
Yeah.
they all have their own schedules according
Right,
to
and it
what
just
the
depends
requirements of
on
the boat are.
how
So
often the owner uses the boat.
Some work harder, some don't work so hard. Some have rotational crew, so the captains, is becoming more common now, is that the captain will be on for 3 months, and then off for 3 months, on for 3 months, off for 3 months, and rotating with another captain or another 2 captains, and the chief officers as well, and the stewardesses, so they have
Right.
more rotation. And actually, that's not a bad. I mean, it's expensive.
That is the industry, though, isn't it?
That's
Right.
expensive to run.
It is.
But it's actually
What,
probably
2 captains?
Yeah, it's
Rotational
expensive.
cap
and
senior
lots more
officers,
travelling and
right.
travelling expenses and things like that.
Is there like a good equilibrium? So say it's horrible working on a 100-meter boat, but it's not good on a 50, but it's great on a 75. Is there like a perfect sized boat, perfect sized crew?
It's every personality is different. We have a lot of captains that are looking for, a boat that stays relatively close to home, for them, so that they can get off the boat, go see their families in the evening.
Yep.
The owner uses the boat, a few weeks of a year. The rest of the time, it's just maintaining the vessel and keeping it clean.
Just
They
sitting
don't
in
keep-
port or doing transits or something like that.
Oh yeah,
So,
moving the boat from
yeah, I
point
mean,
A to
it's,
point B, and
yeah.
for a lot of captains that would be an ideal job, or crew members that would be ideal job, because they can have a life. But then
can
there
have
are
a
other
life,
people that are looking for that. They want the busiest charter boat they can find. Adrenaline junkies.
It's completely personal. So you've got captains who wouldn't ever go on a motor yacht, and only want to go on sailing yachts, and you've got other captains who wouldn't go on a sailing yacht, but only want to go on motor yachts. So it's a completely and the rest of the crew as well.
Yeah.
So it's completely personal. Not surprisingly, every single person is different in so many ways.
And that's what makes it good. Yeah, that makes it wonderful.
Well, it's like it's like running a company. The hardest thing about running a company are the people, but the best thing about running a company are the people. And a boat is a company. It's a company with a big budget, and I think that with this type of thing, I mean the media have actually done a fairly good job at accentuating or at highlighting mental health issues. We couldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago. It just wouldn't have happened, even 5 years ago.
So when you say wouldn't have happened,
No.
why?
Why not? Because it was all kind of, you're just expected to cope. It's like in medicine, you're just expected to cope. And, doctors and
Just get on with it.
Yeah,
Right.
just get on with it. Yeah, tough up.
Yep.
Get on with it. Don't make a scene.
And in John's
Exactly,
other
very much so for
iteration
John's, yeah.
as a paramedic, and rolling up on ghastly scenes. My daughter works in the emergency department in a hospital, and that was the hospital when the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting took place. My daughter was the triage nurse on that particular day, and she went into medical mode, and this one needs to go to the OR, this one needs to go to this bay, this one, and this one's deceased. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 hours later that the impact of what she had in front of her hit her, and she had trouble getting out of bed the next day. She was overwhelmed. And John sees that every day as
You must
a
have seen
paramedic
it.
in the field.
Yeah, you must have seen an evolution in care of mental health of your crews over the past 5 years.
Unbelievable the past 5 years. Excuse me. What it's brought forward, that it's supposed to be talked about more. but I don't think it's being talked about enough. I still think, what you mentioned about we're supposed to be able to deal with this is still the stigma for a lot of people that have been on the job, where we're bringing on a younger generation where we're saying, no, we want you to talk about this. I explain it, if you get in a bad car accident, as soon as you get out of the car, I don't know if you've ever been in one, but you're shaking, and that's your adrenaline that's pumping, that something unexpected just happened. Your sympathetic system just kicked in, and you're going. And then you come down, and you start to come down and feel a little bit of remorse. But for weeks after, anytime you even hear a skid, your sympathetic system kicks back in.
Right.
And that's part of the trauma that you saw or were involved with that stays with you, and it can stay with you for quite a while.
Now, one of the things Becky said, which I had no idea, is once the worst situation happens on a boat, hazmat. What do you call it? What's the term? Hazmat team comes in?
Yeah, well, sometimes what's left behind, whether it's a traumatic injury, on board, if somebody loses a limb or suffers a head injury, there's the aftermath. That person, gets taken off to hospital, hopefully as quickly as possible, and you're left behind with a gruesome scene, and they're not equipped to handle these. This is hazardous material, blood, body fluids, and there have to be proper ways to clean up. Unfortunately, after a suicide, you have to have a body has to be removed. A medical examiner has to step in. It becomes a what's the word I'm looking for? A police case, basically a crime scene. It becomes a crime scene.
It becomes a crime.
It becomes a crime scene, and exactly right. And so you can't touch anything. They have to come in and investigate. Bodies have to be removed, and then someone has to clean it up. We unfortunately have had a few of those incidents.
Now, before we get to that aspect of it, one of the things with dock supervision that we talk about is when we open up a class, one of the first things that I'll discuss with the crews is, what do you do when someone dies on your vessel? And a lot of crews never thought about that. So last night we were actually discussing one of the teaching aspects of responding to non-medical personnel responding to a medical call, which is really what we're doing to handle the emergency that's put in front of you. And what we've been teaching is a pause moment where you actually come up, and the way we were talking last night is, I did this just in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago, where a large laceration down the side leg, and I just sat there and put my hand on the gentleman's pulse and just talked to him. But I didn't treat the guy yet, because I was getting everything together in my head saying, okay, what's going on in this entire scene?
Right.
Where is everybody? Who's who? About 20 seconds went by, and then I was calmed down enough that I can take over the scene to be that leader, go into that medical aspect. Now, the problem is with the people that we're bringing in to do this, they don't have that medical background. They were all doing something else, their job on the vessel. Now we're bringing them into this medical aspect, treating this emergency of maybe someone they know, maybe a charter, maybe an owner, and it's a situation that they're not comfortable with or probably have never seen before. So now we try to coordinate everyone with specific jobs so that they focus on that one job. You have a tendency on an emergency to try to just be all over the place. When you focus on the one job and complete that task, then we can have the leader, or what I call the orchestrator, which is supposed to be the medical officer on board, coordinate you to do the next task. But then what we talk about after we get done the whole day is sitting down with everyone that was involved and discussing what you would have done different, what you saw, how did it look from your eyes, how did it look from Doc's eyes, from Becky's eyes, from my eyes, because we all don't see the same thing. And that is really just a debriefing. And what it is, of course I want to make everything better, but more, I want you to get your feelings out on the table of what just happened.
Right.
Worst case scenario is it's a child, because none of us want to see that happen to a child. So when a debriefing has to be done so we can discuss and say, listen, this is what I could have done different, this is what I wish we did different, and then have a follow-up. And this is usually where I talk with the captain and medical officer on board, is say, you have to follow up with your people, not just today and tomorrow, but a week from now, a month from now, 6 months. You have to have that follow-up, because it can slowly creep up on people of what happened 6 months ago. As I said, especially if a child is involved.
It's terrifying, actually, if you're chartering a boat and something like that happens. Wow.
Realistically, I mean, and when we do these classes, we're very real about it. If a child falls over and drowns, and you have to bring the child back on board, which is the rescue aspect we teach, and then do the resuscitation aspect of it, which is the medical aspect, and then we have the evacuation aspect of it. So it's not just one small aspect of, hey, I'm just going to call Doc and say, hey, Doc, this is what I have. It's Doc saying, okay, this is your next step, and then we have to evacuate and get you somewhere where we can get you the care that you need for recovery.
John makes a very good point about so on our medical courses, we're actually ironically not teaching people very complicated stuff. We're teaching them pretty simple stuff and how to do it really, really well at the right time. So that, and we try and teach them a framework within which to think. So to think about the mental health side of things, when you're presented with somebody with bones sticking out or a lot of blood or something which which we're kind of fairly used to in hospital. So, but every case is different. You've got to have a framework within which to think. And it's interesting hearing John say that, because when I get called down to the emergency department, I only get called down there for, it's usually young baby, very small babies or young kids, something like that, or something, very bad trauma. And I kind of run down there, and then before I go around the corner into the room, I stop and I just have a quick clear the mind, know what my priorities are, and I go around, and then everything's got to be just nice and quiet, nice and organised. Don't need too many people there to help. But everything just nice and just one voice, commanding the situation to try and get the best result. And exactly the same thing on the boat. And we see this with the good captains. You go on board and you think, oh, this is, and it's ironic. It's a kind of funny thing because the boats will be really neat and tidy, everything in the right place, and the crew are just sat around, just relaxing and everything's in place and they've done everything. Other boats you go on to, and it's just chaos, and everybody's running around, and there's shouting, and and you think, well, if a medical emergency happened on there, their abilities to be able to deal with the front end stuff through all the different phases of what might need to happen, and then cope with the debrief, or even if they had a debrief session afterwards, which some of the boats just wouldn't do it.
Ignore it and move on.
Limited. I mean, we sit down in hospital. If we've had so just a few weeks ago, I spent quite a lot of my evening, a couple of weeks ago, resuscitating a 5-year-old about 4 o'clock in the morning, and very, very nearly didn't make it. But actually, we turned things around, and actually sitting down afterwards, at 8 o'clock in the morning with a cup of coffee with some sugar in it, because my sympathetic nervous system was working overtime, was actually, and just thinking, how did that go? I mean, it was a good outcome from that point of view, but even then, I mean, it was pretty bloody stressful.
Well, one of the things,
just being able to sit down and just talk about things afterwards, and getting other people's opinions about what went well,
and one of the things that John and I
constructively
talk about when we do training on board and we're interacting with the crew, we point out to them, I guess in regards to their defibrillators, the most common misconception is, they believe that because they have this piece of equipment, if somebody has a heart attack, that's going to save them. And they're shocked when we look at them and tell them that it's highly unlikely, more often than not, someone isn't going to survive. The percentage is very small.
But that's not what I've seen on TV.
Exactly right.
It works every time.
Exactly right.
You just stick with it.
And unfortunately, that is, the misconception. And so John and I straight away want to dispel them of the idea that is always going to be the case, and that they need to be prepared that the outcome may not be very good.
It's very likely not to be very good.
Exactly right. It's very likely to be not right.
Just dealing with their expectations doesn't mean to say they don't try. You should try. And I've supervised a cardiac arrest in the middle of the Atlantic, and on a satellite phone with the crew trying everything for an hour and a half.
You're on the phone there trying to.
Yes. So I could hear the defibrillator. It was a semi-automatic defibrillator. So that was telling me. That was actually quite good, because it was actually telling me messages that, and so I was getting independent kind of flow of information from the crew, but also from the defibrillator as well, that I could hear in the background. but it's unsuccessful. That was the captain, and that's the other thing, of course, is that quite often these the crew are dealing with a medical emergency with somebody that they know very well. And this crew had been together for about 15 years, and it was the captain who collapsed and ultimately died.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to offload. So they had the body in a body bag. So they had to drop that off in Bermuda, and then they came back to the UK. And so we held a debrief session 2 weeks further down the line, just to chew over how things went. And I see that crew on a fairly regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things. If you are getting on with your crew, they are your friends. And
They're
if
your
a
family. They're really, for
Yeah.
a lot of these people, they're your family.
Family's a very accurate way of saying it, and not all families kind of get on too well
Exactly
together.
right. Exactly right.
But you have that kind of mutual identity.
That's exactly
And,
it.
so,
you are,
yeah, it
you
is,
are
it's a
the family
Yeah.
on the boat. And
Yeah.
it's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It goes
And
back to your night out. If your night out can go either way, it can be a binding night out. A bonding night out.
Or it just
it can
brings
be-
out
yeah,
the-
yeah, it can be. So it can be one of those. Hey, remember that one night
Exactly
wherever
right.
we were, or it could.
And really, I think the most important aspect for all of us, whether it's in the hospital and a trained physician, whether it's me as a trained nurse, John as a trained paramedic, we're not immune from the physical aspects of that kind of stress. Year after
Yeah.
year after year after year, we get a bit jaded. We
You don't look it.
I've had people tell me, you're always so calm. Everyone else was screaming and carrying on. And John's got to deal with that, with a parent who's sitting there with a child that these guys are working on. I hear a lot. Paramedics, they were unemotional. And that
Yeah.
bothered them. The doctors, they're unemotional. They didn't care.
didn't care,
Yeah,
yeah.
but what they were
want them?
caring very much. No, they were dialed in. They were they were focused on doing their
you
job.
do hear that a lot.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you're busy screaming and coming apart at the seams, and these guys are trying to do their job, knowing that, mom's over there, or dad, or crew members,
Probably want to come in and try.
losing it, and we have to stay focused. We have to do our job. And in the aftermath of any kind of an event, whether you're yacht crew or you're professional, people, the aftermath, when it's all said and done, we all sit there and we go, and sometimes we can't put it behind us. There are times when we hit the wall. You get to a point where you can't cope anymore. You have to step away. And it's hard to do. It's really hard to look at somebody and say, you know what? I need to take a break. I can't do this right now. And they're shocked and surprised. You're always the one in control. What do you mean you have to take a break? Because we need to. Police officers, soldiers, and they come home and they come off a battlefield where they live like this for a year, and they come home and they can't cope. A car backfires and their body takes over. And
It's amazing. This is definitely going to be a revolving topic, I think.
I hope so. I
Because
hope that this conversation continues, ad nauseum. For years, they never had defibrillators on yachts. Now it's hard to find one that doesn't have, and it was because it was pointed out that this was a valuable piece of equipment. I hope the approach to mental health is exactly the same way. We talk about it. Everyone's aware of it. They take a little more time paying attention to your fellow crew members, and unfortunately, one of the things that comes up after someone has taken their own life, you'll talk to them, and one of the first things that everyone will say is that they had no idea. They never knew that there was anything wrong. And basically they were busy going on with their own lives. There probably were very subtle things going on, but nobody ever put it all together to realize that those were the things they should have paid attention to. And now the survivor, the people that are left behind, have to sit there and deal with guilt. Did we miss something? Did we bully this person? Did we have some culpability? You know,
God, blimey. We're running out of time, but we'll definitely have to, because the guilt thing is
the guilt
huge.
thing. The guilt thing. And it's very important that those that are left behind after an event like that, you know, they need help to cope, to put it into perspective.
together,
to put it back together.
Discussing it being, I think, the number one form of help.
Talking about it.
Talking and sorting it through your own head, saying, listen, you know, a lot of times there was nothing that you could do about it. It wasn't something that you instigated. It was an action that happened on their own. And it always affects all the people around it, around that situation.
Well, we've ended on a very morbid note. But it's interesting how much further it can still be.
Yeah.
It can still go.
Everything we're talking about doing, I mean, when we get, so you can see how excited we all get about the care that we have the ability to help with.
Yeah.
It's not difficult stuff. And that's, I think, the hardest point to get across to everyone is, I know we're asking you something that is not your specialty, that's not within your realm, but what we're really offering is to help you get there. So whether it be trauma or whether it be medical or mental health, we have, you know, Doc and his associates here that will help us get through it.
Yeah.
And it's just taking that next step. And real quick, I know we're finishing up. When I first started instructing on vessels, I would go through the class and do the instruction outline. And one of the most interesting things, I think, when I would talk about charters and psychiatric problems, all of a sudden you would see crews just light up and go, yeah, I had that situation. Nobody would discuss it until I opened up about it and said, hey, did you ever have this type of situation where there might have been an episode, a manic episode? And all of a sudden, everyone would start talking about it. And I'm always sat there and wondered, did you guys ever discuss this before? What did you talk about what to do? So now, I think we're seeing it more open, where it's become more part of the class where we're saying, hey, make the call.
You don't talk about your feelings very often.
Who?
British people.
Don't we?
No.
Okay. Right.
Well, thank you for joining us. We will continue this forward. And that wraps our 3-session panel.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Good.
That was comfortable. It's a nice format.
We only have 2.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah.